Welcome to Le Weekend, the bonus extended podcast episode for France News Brief. In case you missed one of our dailies, we've put together a convenient way to catch up on the stories from the past week in France, plus additional content about something related to culture, art, history, or current events at the end. If you enjoyed our daily updates, you'll find everything you need right here in a seamless recap of the week's most important headlines. Perfect for those who want to catch up in just one episode, Le Weekend is designed to keep you informed and engaged with a lighter touch at the end. Let's dive in. This is the news for Monday, September 22nd. President Macron said there will be no embassy in Palestine until Hamas frees Gaza hostages. In an interview with CBS News this weekend, the French president also spoke out against plans to displace Palestinians from Gaza when rebuilding the territory, as France joined the list of countries that recognize Palestine, which was announced today at the United Nations, as reported by Le Monde. Bernard Arnault, head of luxury goods group LVMH and France's richest man, has attacked the so-called Zucman tax. Arnault said the proposed 2% tax on billionaires is a deadly assault on France's economy and denounced the plan's architect as a far-left ideologue, as reported by Les Echos. French auto group Stellantis presented a battery without inverter or charger, a prototype vehicle equipped with a more integrated, more compact and more affordable electric battery, thanks to the elimination of two standard components of electric cars, as reported by Les Echos. A French couple plans a 3-month relay swim across the Atlantic. Mathieu and Chloé Whitford plan to set off from Cape Verde off the African coast for a 2,360-mile swim to the French Caribbean island of Guadeloupe, as reported by Reuters. The trial of Cédric Jubilard began today in a case that captivated the nation. He is accused of killing his wife in 2020, but denies the accusations, and her body has never been found, as reported by Le Monde. Centre Pompidou in Paris is closing its doors for a 5-year renovation. The Museum of Modern Art closed its doors this evening ahead of a €460 million renovation scheduled to be completed by 2030, as reported by Le Monde. A small number of wine growers have been experimenting for several years with the use of hybrid grape varieties that are more resistant to diseases such as mildew and powdery mildew. Their goal is to free themselves from pesticides, which are omnipresent in traditional vineyards. But faced with a profession attached to its heritage and consumers who need convincing, these new practices are struggling to gain traction, as reported by France 24. This is the news for Tuesday, September 23rd. France officially recognized the state of Palestine on Monday, alongside a dozen other countries such as Canada and the United Kingdom. President Macron said in an address at the United Nations in New York that the decision is the only way to isolate Hamas and establish a legitimate civil authority and demilitarize, as reported by France Info. Swiss financial group UBS agreed to pay €853 million, approximately $1 billion, payment to resolve a pending French tax evasion case. The case concerned its cross-border business activities in France between 2004 and 2012, as reported by Reuters. France's Court of Audit said that the public broadcaster France Télévisions is in a critical financial situation. The court said that the group has its back to the wall due to a critical financial situation requiring immediate structural reforms, as reported by France 24. Irish airline Ryanair will repay 1.8 million euros, approximately 2.1 million US dollars, and use state aid received in relation to Carcassonne Airport. The European Commission had opened an investigation into discounts and marketing agreements concluded between 2001 and 2011, as reported by Le Figaro. This is the news for Wednesday, September 24th. A Paris court ordered French pharmaceutical group Sanofi and its Winthrop unit to pay 100.7 million euros, approximately 177 million US dollars, in damages to France's National Health Insurance Fund for anti-competitive practices related to its anti-clotting drug Plavix, as reported by Reuters. French unions have called for more protests to put pressure on the new prime minister. Another day of strikes and protests are set for October 2nd over demands to scrap his predecessor's austerity fiscal program, as reported by Reuters. A 14-year-old high school student in eastern France stabbed his music teacher in the face in a classroom before turning his knife on himself. Authorities said the teacher's injuries were not life-threatening, as reported by Le Monde. Greenpeace France called for a ban on hexane, a dangerous solvent. According to a report by the NGO, traces of a potentially toxic hydrocarbon have been detected in oils, infant milk, butter, and even chicken. Greenpeace is urging French and European authorities to take action against regulations deemed outdated, as reported by Le Figaro. France has fewer poor people, but more people on low income compared to the European Union overall. France has a lower poverty rate than the European average, but a slightly higher proportion of people with a modest standard of living, according to the French Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Retirees, for their part, appear to be particularly protected, as reported by Le Figaro. This is the news for Thursday, September 25th. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy was sentenced to 5 years in prison in relation to the Libyan campaign financing case. The former president was found guilty of criminal conspiracy, but was acquitted of corruption charges, as reported by RFI. French debt hit a record 3.4 trillion euros, approximately 4 trillion US dollars, piling pressure on the new prime minister. Figures from the ANSES Statistics Agency show Prime Minister Le Cornu, the former defense minister, now faces a debt that amounted to 115.6% of France's gross domestic product in the second quarter, as reported by Le Monde. Champagne Franken-Pommery entered exclusive negotiations to sell Heidsieck and Company Monopole, one of the best-selling brands of champagne, to Lanson BCC. Financial details were not disclosed, as reported by Le Figaro. In a turning point against HIV, a highly effective drug, lenacapavir, is to be offered at just 34 euros, approximately 40 US dollars per year in France. This antiretroviral has shown unprecedented results in HIV prevention, requiring only 2 injections per year. Its manufacturer initially had marketed at a price of 28,000, as reported by Le Monde. France is accused of restricting protests and eroding democracy. A report from the Observatory for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders said state authorities are increasingly stigmatizing civil society organizations and that freedoms once taken for granted are being steadily chipped away, as reported by RFI. Home fragrances, including incense and sprays, can be harmful to health. Consumer advocates, 60 million consumers, warned that regular and prolonged use of home fragrances should be avoided, especially for children, pregnant women, and asthmatics, as reported by Le Figaro. France has dropped its case before the International Court of Justice against Iran for violating the right to consular protection of two French citizens who have been held in detention for over 3 years, as reported by Reuters. The Eurotunnel and Eurostar are ready to launch the new biometric checks at EU borders. The entry-exit system, called EES, which will begin rolling out on October 12th, will record the contact details and biometric data of affected travelers in order to track overstays and entry refusals, as reported by Le Figaro. This is the news for Friday, September 26th. New French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu said today that he aims to cut France's budget deficit to 4.7% of GDP in 2026 and 3% by 2029, but that his government would not be reintroducing a wealth tax, as reported by La Tribune. Germany is weighing a possible development of the new European fighter jet without Dassault. Germany is determined not to give in to French aerospace firm Dassault's demands for higher work share in a project to develop a new European fighter jet, and could press on without France if talks fail, according to sources cited by Reuters. As French pharmacists call for a boycott of COVID-19 vaccine orders, professional bodies and unions have issued stern warnings over the threat to public health. As preparations get underway for this autumn's dual vaccination campaign against the flu and COVID-19, due to kick off on October 14th, messages have been circulating on pharmacists' online forums and social media groups urging colleagues not to order vaccine doses, a move intended as a form of protest against government policies, as reported by RFI. President Macron put an end to months of suspense about the CEO appointments for two public companies. Former Prime Minister Jean Castex is to lead railway group SNCF and Marie-Ange Desbons to lead postal services La Poste. Both appointments are subject to parliamentary approval, as reported by Le Figaro. It's time to dive into the bonus story. This week we're looking at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris and why it made the news. The reopening of the towers at Notre Dame on September 20th and 21st, coinciding with European Heritage Days, is a triumph that builds on the milestone last year when it reopened to the public in December. Who could forget the fire 6 years ago as the world caught its breath, willing the towers to hold upright? Today, the cathedral stands renewed, her towers once again welcoming visitors to ascend and witness panoramic views just as they have for centuries. The disaster that ravaged Notre Dame shocked the global community. For nearly a millennium, this masterpiece of Gothic architecture had stood watch over the Seine River, a spiritual and cultural beacon. But on that tragic day of April 15, 2019, a fire ignited beneath the roof, fueled by ancient wooden beams and fanned by the wind. Flames engulfed the iconic spire, an emblem of 19th century restoration by Eugène Viollet-le-Duc, that we'll come back to in a moment, that collapsed in a thunderous cascade of burning timber. The cathedral's roof was gutted as thick plumes of smoke rose over Paris. But amid the devastation, a spark of hope. Emergency teams and experts heroically saved the iconic Twin Towers, the western facade, and a vast majority of priceless artifacts, including the Crown of Thorns. Because the stone-vaulted ceiling miraculously held, it absorbed the shock and kept more extensive ruin at bay. What remained was a battered monument, but a community determined to restore it. Within days, the world rallied. Donations poured in, over 140 million euros, around 982 million US dollars, within 2 years, from passionate supporters across the globe, including a remarkable $10.6 million from more than 10,000 donors in the United States alone. President Emmanuel Macron declared an ambitious goal to restore the cathedral to its former glory within 5 years, reopening by December 2024. The triumphant reopening last December saw dignitaries, royalty, and heads of state in attendance, and also the people that worked in the restoration. So why is Notre Dame in the news this week? The restoration unfolded in phases crafted with surgical precision. The initial safety phase, around the first 2 years, was delicate and dangerous. Removing the twisted hunks of the burnt scaffolding and beams perched 90 meters up in the air required teams of experts and specialists to work with extreme caution. Securing the cathedral was paramount. Wrapping the fragile gargoyles and sculptures in protective materials, reinforcing flying buttresses injured in the blaze, removing toxic lead layered across the interior, and stabilizing damaged stone pillars. All these tasks were undertaken painstakingly over many months to prevent further deterioration. Only then could the physical rebuilding begin. The reconstruction phase from 2021 to 2024 was a dance between history and technology. The wooden framework, referred to as the forest, was recreated from scratch using over 12,000 newly felled oak trees from sustainably managed forests. This ancient carpentry marble, once made of medieval timbers nearly 900 years old, demanded the skills of master woodworkers, transporting techniques handed down through centuries. Each beam was shaped to replicate the original medieval construction. The birth of the spire was equally symbolic. The decision was made to restore Viollet-le-Duc's 19th century design rather than replace it with a modern interpretation. Craftsmen molded lead sheets and forged metal using traditional methods, some performed by artisans whose families have practiced their trades for generations. The spire's reinstallation in December 2023, 1 year before the reopening, was also a symbolic moment, showing that Notre Dame was literally rising from the ashes. While the reconstruction followed tradition, the new building also incorporates state-of-the-art fire detection systems and suppression equipment hidden discreetly. Electrical, plumbing, and climate control systems were upgraded, blending invisibly with Gothic aesthetic. Conservation extended to the cathedral's famed stained glass windows and the grand organ, whose nearly 8,000 pipes were stripped, cleaned of toxic dust, and fine-tuned back to life. So while last December Notre Dame met the deadline and partially reopened to the faithful and tourists alike, the work was far from finished. The final phase, still underway in 2025, focuses on restoring the forecourt, the facade's intricate stonework, and the approach to the cathedral, including a new landscaping design. This week, when the cathedral's towers reopened to the public, visitors ascended 424 steps on a newly crafted oak double helix staircase, which replaces earlier metal steps. Along the climb, immersive soundscapes accompany the main events in history. Whispered prayers, historic chants, and choir music accompany visitors, bringing them closer than ever to the spirit of the place. Tickets for the opening weekend sold out in less than half an hour. In the belfry, visitors can see the cathedral's two main bells, including the one named Emmanuel and weighing over 13 tons, which ring only for major events. Breathtaking views stretch from the Seine snaking through Ile de la Cité to the outer limits of the city. The reopening of the towers to visitors also emphasized the resilience of the team that fought to save them and then to rebuild them. It also reflects how Notre Dame was never frozen in medieval times, but is a living heritage continuously being shaped. Notre Dame is woven deeply into the fabric of French identity. Founded in the 12th century on the Ile de la Cité, the island at the heart of Paris where earlier sacred sites once stood, the cathedral rose on the ambitious vision of Bishop Maurice de Sully. Groundbreaking in 1163, it took nearly 2 centuries to complete, reflecting changing architectural styles from early Gothic to the Rayonnant period. Notre Dame became a site of pivotal national moments. From the coronation of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1804, which reaffirmed its central role in French political and religious life, to serving as the backdrop for royal weddings and historic funerals. It was a bulwark through revolutions and wars. Enduring the French Revolution, as public affection was rekindled by Victor Hugo's 1831 novel The Hunchback of Notre Dame, leading to its 19th century restoration by Eugène Viollet-le-Duc, notably with the addition of the famous spire. The symbolic power as both a monument and a place of worship resonates beyond France's borders. Before the fire, it welcomed over 12 million visitors annually, the most visited monument in Paris, and housed precious relics like the Crown of Thorns, one of the most sacred relics of the Christian world, which has taken quite a journey. According to Christian tradition, it is the very crown placed on the head of Jesus Christ during his crucifixion. The relic's documented history begins in Jerusalem, where it was venerated by pilgrims from at least the 5th century. It was later moved to Constantinople for safekeeping during the Middle Ages. In 1238, facing financial difficulties, the Latin Emperor of Constantinople sold the crown of thorns to King Louis IX of France, who later became Saint Louis. The crown arrived in Paris in a grand procession in August 1239, with Saint Louis himself reportedly carrying it barefoot to Notre Dame, underscoring its immense spiritual weight. To properly house such a relic, King Louis commissioned the construction of Sainte-Chapelle, a stunning Gothic chapel located near Notre Dame, which you can visit today, completed in 1248 specifically for this purpose. The crown remained mostly at Sainte-Chapelle until the French Revolution, when it was moved for safekeeping, including to the Abbey of Saint-Denis and the National Library. It returned to Notre Dame in 1803. During the recent fire, however, the crown of thorns was evacuated, narrowly escaping destruction. It is now returned as one of the cathedral's most treasured artifacts, protected in a specially designed reliquary. The restoration of Notre Dame brought together artists, stonemasons, carpenters, metalworkers, engineers, chemists, united across disciplines. Medieval techniques combined with laser scanning, 3D printing, and chemical analysis. So now visitors will experience a double story, not just the past and the history of Notre Dame, but also the message that still in our age, this recent epic rebuilding effort shows that we can come together as a community to preserve something we treasure. Thank you for listening to Le Weekend, your one-stop destination for everything we covered this past week in France. Catch our daily France News Brief roundups of the main news in France every weekday, wherever you get your podcasts. Stay informed.